The border of life and death, the latent powers of the human mind, forbidden knowledge hidden and disguised. Not what we usually think of as science, but still the basis for some great sci-fi. Over the next few episodes, I want to dive into some truly weird sci-fi. But to truly understand it, you have to understand where it's coming from. And to understand that, you have to understand the scientific environment of the late 19th and early 20th century. The turn of the 20th century was the last true golden age of the occult. Every day, science was revealing new wonders about our world, and allowing people to do so many things that might before have been considered magic. It seemed like there was no limit on the possible. At the rate we were discovering new things, it seemed like anything might be real, which led to an era of authors exploring the fantastic. Some of it was a response to 19th century rationalism. Some of it was a holdover from the Romantic movement, wanting to put some magic back into the world. Some of it was just an earnest exploration of avenues of existence science had previously overlooked. Some of it was hucksters looking to part fools from their money, and some of it was bored rich people just looking for something that felt exciting, dangerous, and transgressive to do on a Saturday night. But wherever it came from, this was an era in which the occult started adopting the trappings of science. And science, in turn, began exploring the possibilities of the occult. And the occult became enormously popular. It was so popular that people ranging from Abraham Lincoln to Arthur Conan Doyle attended seances, and notable scientists and engineers like Thomas Edison took a serious look at the scientific basis for supernatural phenomena. Telepathy, astral projection, communing with the dead through seances, and other occult practices had not yet been totally dismissed as unscientific, and as such, they became hip in a counterculture way. These occultish things were edgy and full of mystique, so science fiction writers, always on the edge of that fringe, took these ideas and ran with them. After all, the occult seemed to provide such great answers for many of the problems we face in science fiction. You want to travel around the universe at incredible speed? Well, just do it as an astral projection. You want to have faster than light communication? Silent communication? Communication between species that don't speak the same language? Great, telepathy makes all of that possible. Or maybe you're just looking to throw in some really scary critters that know your every thought. I mean, telepathy's great for that too. Have you written yourself into a corner and need your heroes to have answers there's no way they'd have access to? Just have them commune with the dead. You want to make your character exotic and powerful? Just throw all of the occult stuff at them and your readers will eat it up. This was a frequent go-to for a lot of bad sci-fi. A lot of the early pulp sci-fi to come out was rife with this stuff, and often these ideas would even be treated like scientifically proven fact, just so the work could maintain that essential sci-fi dictum of feeling like it's possible. But these ideas weren't only used for bad sci-fi. There was a lot of good science fiction too, or at least important science fiction that really picked up on the underlying element going on with all that occult phenomena. The idea that we live in a world we fundamentally can't control. The idea that there's more to this world than even science tells us. And that's important because at this point in history, the world was getting smaller. Science was shattering many of the world's old mysteries and shining a light on many of the dark recesses of human ideas. And at the same time, exploration and communication were rapidly removing all those places on the map marked "Here There Be Dragons." By the time you get to Lovecraft, if you want monsters on Earth that any readers will believe might exist, you've got to go to the Arctic or bury them at sea. Today, we can't even do that. So why did so many of these sci-fi authors play with the occult? Well, because the ability to speak with the dead, to project out over time and space, to manipulate reality through a powerful enough mind, these are terrifying concepts. They hint at a world behind ours. They tell us that all the comfort and security our science has given us is but a veneer, and that there are much more terrifying things out there just past the boundary of this tiny circle of light science has created. And horror writers like Lovecraft used this to terrify, but other authors like Hodgson, Lindsay, and Stapleton came to a different realization. They realized that the bizarre reality of the occult can be used to blast away our preconceived notions and set up a fundamentally unsettling space where we simply can't know what's meant to be real. These authors would establish science fiction's flirtation with the occult, and the ability of later works like Dune to justify nearly occult powers within a work of science fiction through a combination of genetics, training, and drugs. Which, incidentally, I am sure we will talk about later when we get to the time period where psychedelics were readily available, and questions of the latent abilities of the mind once again enter the public consciousness, and are being explored at least semi-scientifically. But for right now, we're gonna march boldly on to the forgotten foundations of sci-fi. Those novels that were too weird, or obscure, or difficult to ever get much notice outside of sci-fi's most committed students. The works which owed their weirdness to this turn-of-the-century world where pseudo-science was often seen as being the cutting edge of science itself. And while it is true that the bizarro works that spill out of the strange romance between sci-fi and the occult were a bit too much for most audiences, you want to know who did study them, devoured them, ate them up? It was many of the best-selling, best-known names in science fiction. Because for a while there, if you had already read Verne and Wells and were still hungry for more science fiction that wasn't just a Western in space, these works are where you would end up. And we will look a little closer at them next week to see their impact on the history of science fiction.